Hello everyone, my name is Luke Mosier. I'm a reference and instruction librarian at Normandale Community College, and I recorded this video lecture to talk about the types of sources in the sciences. Before I do that, let me just reiterate here that librarians are here to help. If you need help with research or have questions about anything at all, please come find us at the reference desk. Email us, phone in, or meet with us one-on-one for individual research sessions. And if you want to do that, my office hours are posted on my office door, which is L2716. Otherwise, come find me at the reference desk or shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to help you out. All right, so let's get started. There's in the large field of literature and in publishing, there's kind of two different general types of sources. There's popular sources and scholarly sources. Popular sources are things like magazines, newspapers, websites. Like, for example, here I have Popular Mechanics and the New York Times, which is a newspaper. Popular sources. These are written by non-experts for a general audience. They're not edited or reviewed by experts before publication. They often contain no references, and that's both in-text references or a works cited page at the end. And they often have advertising or look flashy. Like, for example, the cover of this magazine for Popular Mechanics, The Future of the Flying Car, is pretty flashy. So it's going to be very eye-catching, and they usually have lots of advertisements and things like that. So on the other side of the spectrum, there is scholarly sources. So scholarly sources, which are sometimes called academic sources, are written by experts for an academic audience. So here I have the journal History, which is a journal about history, as you would expect. And then the New England Journal of Medicine, which is a very important journal in the medical field. And these are both examples of scholarly journals. So, scholarly sources. These are written by experts for an academic audience. Usually, the authors are professors or um, uh, people that work in that field, professionals that are experts in the field and know what they're talking about. Um, so, scholarly sources can be a lot of different kinds of things. They can be articles published in an academic journal or a presentation from an academic conference. They can be books from academic book publishers, or they can be encyclopedias. Those are all considered scholarly or academic. Scholarly sources are edited and reviewed by experts before publication, which is a process called peer review, which I'll talk more about in a minute. And that is a process. Peer review applies specifically to academic journals. Um, Scholarly sources contain references both in text and at the end. So whenever they cite a fact, they will cite exactly where they got it from. And then they will give you the reference to that paper they got it from at the end so you can go and find it for yourself. And then they can be easy to spot because they usually have minimal design and few to no advertisements. So here on the left, the New England Journal of Medicine cover. The cover is actually the table of contents, which is a pretty cool design choice, but it's not eye-catching or flashy. There will be no advertisements at all in there. If you can't tell from these things whether a source is scholarly or not, you can usually go and look at the journal's website or the publisher's website, and their About Us will tell you what kind of work they publish and if they are peer-reviewed or not. So let's talk about peer review for a minute. So this applies specifically to academic journals only. Peer review is the process by which an academic article is reviewed by other experts in a field before publication in an academic journal. So this is how it works. An academic, usually a professor or a professional or a researcher, writes a paper and submits it to a journal. And then the paper is reviewed by other experts, usually other professors, who critique the article for accuracy or for reasoning and so on. And then they will either accept it, reject it, or send it back to the author for further revision. And papers are only published in a journal when all of the experts approve of it. And it is a rigorous process. Sometimes it takes years for an article to get published in an academic journal, but the rigorous process ensures that only the best information ends up getting published. So the things that you will find in academic journals will have been thoroughly vetted for their accuracy. And so again, this process only applies to articles published in academic journals, but other academic sources like books or encyclopedias or conference publications, it doesn't mean that they're not scholarly, or that they're not credible and accurate. It just means that when you hear the term peer-reviewed source, it only applies to this process that happens in academic journals. And for popular sources usually are edited just for grammar and maybe some fact checking, but they do not undergo this same rigorous process before publication. All right, so within the scholarly literature in the sciences, there's two types of literature that we'll talk about: primary sources and secondary sources. So primary source, which is sometimes called primary research, is basically original research. So here on the right hand side, I have an example I found of a recently published original research article that is about DNA. So the main thing about primary sources is that the authors conducted original research themselves. So when you hear the term primary source, think original research. So this can be lab experiments, clinical trials, studies, any kind of original research that's conducted by the authors. And an easy way to spot a research article is to look for the different sections. So a research article will always have these different sections. It'll have an introduction, which explains the topic and what it is and why it's important. It will give a methodology or method section, so it'll explain how the experiment is performed. It will give a materials section that will talk about what specific materials are used for the experiment. It'll give a results section, which talk about the results of the experiment, and then a discussion section, which is what the results might mean, as in what have we learned from the experiment. So you can look for these elements in a paper to determine whether it is a research article or not. And then sometimes at the top of a research article, it has the words research article, which can be a helpful giveaway that this is in fact a primary source. And let me just point out, in this article I found on DNA, the different parts of a research article so that it'll help you spot them. So here is the introduction, which gives an overview of the topic. Here is the materials and methods section. So sometimes methods and materials are separate sections. Here they're combined, which is totally fine. So the methods section is how the experiment is performed, and the materials is what materials are used. And this is really important because other researchers will duplicate this experiment to verify that the results are accurate. It's part of the whole scientific process, is that other scientists will reproduce researchers' experiments to just confirm that the results are accurate and that the conclusions you draw from the experiment are sound. So it's really important to have this section in here. And then there's the results and discussion. So again, sometimes these are separate sections, but in this case they're combined, results and discussion. Either is fine. So the results is just the literal results of the experiment, and then the discussion is the interpretation of the results from which conclusions are drawn, and it's kind of what have we learned from this experiment. All right, so let's talk about a secondary source. So a secondary source or a secondary article is anything that talks about a primary source. So the point is that the authors did not do any original research, but discuss the research that others have done. So a secondary source can be a couple of different things. It can include a paper that reviews or critiques a research article. So the authors are just looking at a single other primary source and then they're reviewing it or critiquing it. A paper, it can be a paper that summarizes the current data on a topic, or the current understanding of a topic. Or it could be a paper that analyzes multiple studies to give an overview of a topic. And there's actually a couple of different names for this. Sometimes it's called a meta-analysis or a systematic review or a literature review. And these are all actually slightly different things, but it kind of gets at the same idea of the authors are looking at multiple different studies and kind of combining the results and giving an overview of this topic. So what to look for secondary articles. So there's no specific consistent form for secondary articles, but the important thing is that the authors did not do original research, but they're writing about other people's research. So sometimes, as in the case of this article, it has review at the top, and so that can be a helpful marker that this is a review article. And another helpful way is that if a source does not contains the sections on materials, methods, results, and discussion, you can infer that it's not a primary source and must be a secondary source. So you could look at it that way. And that's all, folks. Thanks for listening. Again, if you have any questions about anything, feel free to email me at luke.mosier@normandale.edu or come find me in the library. Thanks.